Welcome back everyone. In this video, we are telling the tale of one of Azeroth's most tormented souls. His name is Sir Thomas Thomson, though many of you may know him by another name, and this is his tragic story. In the northern reaches of the Eastern Kingdoms lies the land of Lordaeron, once home to a mighty kingdom that thrived for many years. It served as a political and military hub, strengthened by its devoted citizens, fertile farmlands, and natural defences provided by the Khazmodan mountain range to the south. This paints Lordaeron as an idyllic place, which it was for a period of time. But it did see its fair share of war, and our story today starts off in the time period just before the start of the Third War on Azeroth, after the Orcish horde had been defeated and confined following the First and the Second Wars. To the humans of Lordaeron, peace seemed secure, but dark forces were brewing beneath the surface. After the defeat in the Second War, the old horde's warchief Ner'zhul was captured by the demon lord Kil'jaeden for his failure. As punishment, Kil'jaeden destroyed Ner'zhul's body and subjected his spirit to relentless torment until the Orc shaman agreed to serve the Burning Legion once more. His soul was then encased in a suit of armour and bound to the Frozen Throne. Kil'jaeden hurled this creation toward Azeroth, where it crashed into the Ice-Crown Glacier, marking the birth of the Lich King, the first major figure of the Third War. When the moment was right, Kil'jaeden revealed the purpose of the Lich King's existence. Ner'zhul was tasked with unleashing a plague of death and terror upon Azeroth, intended to wipe out human civilization. All who perished from this plague would rise again as undead. Using his telepathic abilities, the Lich King reached out across Azeroth, summoning dark souls to serve him, particularly those skilled in the arcane. One of the first to answer the call was Kel'Thuzad, a mage and key figure in Dalaran's Kirin Tor. Kel'Thuzad soon became the Lich King's loyal servant, founding the Cult of the Damned, a group that worshipped the Lich King as a god and learned necromancy to bolster his undead legions. Kel'Thuzad, along with the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis, was instructed to prepare the way for the plague spread. Kel'Thuzad returned to Lordaeron in disguise, using the floating Dread Citadel Naxxramas as his base of operations. Over the course of 3 years, he utilized his wealth and intellect to recruit a secretive brotherhood of like-minded individuals. This group, as we mentioned, he named the Cult of the Damned. He gained followers with promises of social equality and eternal life on Azeroth in exchange for their unwavering loyalty and obedience to Ner'zhul. With Kel'Thuzad's success, the Lich King completed his final preparations for the assault on human civilization. Meanwhile, life in Lordaeron carried on peacefully, with its communities thriving. Countless farming families worked together, cultivating the land to sustain the growing and tranquil kingdom, and this is where the heart of today's story lies. Among one of those families was the Thomsons. The Thomsons were a modest, quiet family who owned and operated a pumpkin farm in Tirisfal Glades, just southwest of Agamand Mills. The farm was managed by Thomas and his wife Susanna as they raised their 2 children, Joel and Gina. The Thomsons were a respected family within their community, but as tensions rose and darkness began to creep into Lordaeron, Thomas found himself leaving behind his humble farming life in pursuit of something far greater. Thomas was not merely a pumpkin farmer, that was simply his role during times of peace. In truth, he was a knight, a distinguished member of the Order of the Knights of the Silver Hand, the martial arm of the Church of Holy Light. This order consisted of warriors skilled not only in wielding the light, but also in leadership and mastery of traditional combat, while upholding the values of loyalty, bravery, and honor. The order was established during the Second War to unite human forces against the Orcish onslaught. In Stratholme's Alonza's Chapel, Uther was appointed the first paladin, followed by Saidan Dathrahan, Tyrion Fordring, Terrellian, and Gavinrad. The Knights of the Silver Hand made their first appearance during the Battle of Hillsbrad Foothills, where their arrival brought hope and courage to the Alliance forces. Eventually, their role was crucial in securing victory against the Orcs during the Second War. The lore surrounding Thomas Thomson has some gaps. He could have been a seasoned war veteran of the Order, or perhaps a reserve recruit who joined after the war. While the details remain unclear, what we do know for certain is that he was a member of the Knights of the Silver Hand at the time of the Scourging of Lordaeron, which brings us on to the next chapter of his story. Unbeknownst to the people of Lordaeron, the Lich King infused his plague into several portable artifacts known as plague cauldrons. Ner'zhul instructed Kel'Thuzad to transport these cauldrons to Lordaeron, where they were hidden in various cult-controlled villages. Guarded by loyal cultists, the cauldrons served as plague generators, slowly releasing the deadly contagion across the unsuspecting farmlands and towns in northern Lordaeron. The Lich King's plan unfolded flawlessly. Many northern villages were quickly infected, and just as in Northrend, those who succumbed to the plague rose again as the Lich King's obedient undead slaves. As the plague spread, the number of undead swelled throughout the north. Kel'Thuzad, witnessing the growing army, named it the Scourge, destined to march upon Lordaeron and wipe humanity from existence. Following the Lich King's orders, Kel'Thuzad oversaw the infection of a small town named Brill, where he was discovered by Jaina Proudmoore and Prince Arthas. After a brief confrontation, Kel'Thuzad fled, and Jaina and Arthas pursued him to Anderhall. Upon arriving, Arthas and Jaina uncovered the horrifying truth. The granaries in Anderhall were contaminated with the plague, and it was killing anyone who consumed the tainted grain. Since Anderhall was the region's main grain distributor, many other towns were now at risk. As they battled their way through the infected city, they witnessed unprecedented devastation. Eventually, they confronted Kel'Thuzad for his role in these atrocities.
Naive fool. My death will make little difference in the long run. For now, the scourging of this land begins.
Before they killed him, the necromancer revealed that he served a greater power, a dreadlord named Mal'Ganis, the higher entity who was behind the Scourge's rise. Enraged by this revelation, Arthas swore to destroy Mal'Ganis and set out for Stratholme. As Arthas and his forces arrived at the gates of Stratholme, they were met by the Knights of the Silver Hand, one of those knights, Sir Thomas Thomson. The events that followed are well known in Warcraft history, marked by one of the most famous quotes in the game's lore.
Fine now, but it's just a matter of time before they turn into the undead. This entire city must be purged.
What?
Thomas was among the knights who opposed the decision to purge Stratholme, aligning himself with Uther the Lightbringer and Jaina Proudmoore in rejecting the plan. In response, Arthas disbanded the Order of the Silver Hand and proceeded into Stratholme with his loyalists. Uther, along with the paladins that stayed loyal to him, left the city, abandoning Arthas to his brutal course of action. Thomas returned home with Uther, helping his community defend against the ever-growing scourge. As the undead threat spread, villages were consumed, aided by the treacherous Baron Rivendare and his corrupted food supplies. Thomas witnessed the turning of a village he was stationed in. Realizing Rivendare's betrayal, he reported it to Saidan Dathrahan and the Silver Hand. Though Thomas was eager to continue assisting Saidan and the knights, Saidan reminded him that he had a family to care for. He assured Thomas that no one in the Order would fault him for spending time with his loved ones during such dark times. As his superior, Saidan Dathrahan ordered Sir Thomas to return home, rest, and be with his family. Shortly after, Thomas received the devastating news that Prince Arthas had returned from Northrend and murdered his own father, King Menethil II, and then later the revered paladin, Uther the Lightbringer. Thomas believed the seeds of these crimes were sown long before Arthas set sail to Northrend, with the purge of Stratholme being a key turning point. Around this time, Jaina Proudmoore was gathering the people of Lordaeron, following the advice of a mysterious prophet who warned her that their homeland was doomed. He urged her that the only way to survive was to journey across the Great Sea to the unknown lands of Kalimdor. Fearing for his family's safety, Thomas urged his wife and children to flee to Kalimdor with Jaina. Thomas managed to convey the gravity of the situation and convince them to go. This decision would ultimately prove to be one of the most devastating mistakes the Thomson family would ever make. Thomas returned to his superior, Saidan Dathrahan, to resume his service. Years later, after the end of the Third War, during an assault on the now Scourge-controlled city of Stratholme, Saidan was separated from the group and captured by the dreadlord Balnazar. The demon killed Saidan Dathrahan and then possessed his body, using magic to prevent its decay. Now disguised as the revered holy warrior, Balnazar intended to corrupt the remaining paladins into his service. However, Alexandros Mograine, being beyond the dreadlord's influence, posed a threat to his plans. The sooner Alexandros was eliminated, the easier it would be for Balnazzar to manipulate the other paladins. Although Alexandros Mograine was somewhat resistant to the manipulations of the Dreadlords, his son Reno was not. Balnazzar manipulated Reno, turning him to the darkness. Reno Mograine was eventually coerced into committing one of the most grievous acts imaginable, murdering his own father, and he did so using his own weapon, the Ashbringer. With the High Lord Alexandros now dead and the Ashbringer falling into Kel'Thuzad's hands, Saidan, now Balnazzar, seized control of the newly formed Scarlet Crusade, becoming its leader and Grand Crusader. Still unaware of the truth behind Dathrahan's death and the possession of his body, Sir Thomas chose to stay loyal to him and joined the Scarlet Crusade. Over time, Balnazzar, using Saidan Dathrahan's body and influence over the paladins, gradually twisted the Crusade into a fanatical sect, obsessed not only with eradicating the undead, but also with ruthlessly eliminating anyone who opposed them. At this point, it has been 4 years since the end of the Third War, yet the people of Lordaeron continue to face the persistent threat of the Scourge. In the year 24, the Scarlet Crusade began intensifying patrols through Lordaeron's villages, inspecting them for any signs of the lingering plague. On one tragic day, Dathrahan led the Scarlet Crusaders to a settlement north of Dulcin's Tears in the Western Plaguelands. It was full of refugees, and he claimed they went there for a routine plague inspection. Thomas, trusting his leader, was unaware of the true purpose. Slowly and methodically, Dathrahan manipulated Thomas, convincing him that the town's population was infected and were beyond saving. Thomas steeled himself and joined in the grim task of slaughtering the refugees, believing it was necessary for the greater good. In the frenzy of the massacre, Thomas cut down one refugee after another, until, in a devastating moment, he unknowingly struck his own family. It wasn't until his sword found its mark in the last figure before him that he realized the horrifying truth. His daughter, turning in those final moments, looked at him with wide, pleading eyes as his blade fell. His heart shattered as he pieced together the awful truth. When he had sent them to board the last ship to Kalimdor with Jaina Proudmoore, a sudden storm struck earlier than expected, crippling their chances to escape. With Lordaeron in chaos and no one left to repair the ship, they had likely been forced to seek shelter in this very town. The weight of his actions destroyed him, as Thomas stood over the bodies of his loved ones, the very people he had sworn to protect, slain by his own blade. Thomas would eventually be consumed by darkness, though not in the way we've seen so far. His torment came from within. In a broken fit of rage, the devastated Thomas was taken back to the Scarlet Crusade's headquarters, a former monastery they had seized during the wars, allowing his grief and torment to fester, moulding him into a vessel of pure, unrelenting rage. In late October that year, the 24th year, the festive period known as Hallow's End began. It's a peasant festival, still celebrated throughout the lands of Lordaeron. It was believed to be a time when the veil between the living and the dead grew thin, allowing those who had passed on to be sensed by the living. Traditionally, at the end of the harvest season, before the harsh winds of winter arrived, a large straw effigy was erected just outside the main palace. At sunset on the night of the ceremony, the effigy would be set ablaze in a spectacular display. During the ceremony, anyone could approach the burning effigy and toss a branch into its crackling flames, symbolically burning away anything they wished to leave behind them as they entered the quiet, reflective winter months. During this Hallow's End celebration, the Scarlet Crusaders launched another assault on the remaining Scourge forces across the land. This time, however, they convinced the tormented Sir Thomas Thomson to join them in the battle. The tortured soul ventured back out into the lands of Lordaeron, but his mind finally gave way. In a blind, frenzied rage, he slaughtered countless undead, but as his grip on reality shattered, he could no longer tell friend from foe. Lost to the madness, Thomas turned on his fellow Crusaders, cutting down his own comrades in the same brutal fashion. The Crusaders quickly regrouped and managed to subdue Thomas. His execution for treachery was swiftly ordered, and at last, Azeroth's most tormented soul finally met his end, as the executioner's blade severed his head from his shoulders. Saidan Dathrahan persuaded the other Crusaders that Thomas Thomson deserved a honourable burial, urging them to overlook his treachery as the consequence of a mind broken by tragedy and madness. Thomas's body was taken to the Scarlet Monastery graveyard, where Dathrahan personally laid him to rest in a tomb. However, as we know, Dathrahan had been dead for years. This was, in fact, the Dreadlord Balnazar in disguise. Once alone, Balnazar performed a dark ritual using his own blood and fell energies to raise Thomas's corpse. In a world-altering event, he created the Headless Horseman, a savage, haunting undead being driven by his own twisted, maddened will. It has now become tradition that every Hallow's End, the Headless Horseman awakens and rides out from the Scarlet Monastery, haunting busy areas across Azeroth to torment the living. If you find your favourite tavern ablaze during a late October night, you can be sure it's the Horseman's doing. The Shade of the Horseman frequently attacks villages such as Karanos, Goldshire, Azure Watch, Razor Hill, Brill, and Falconwing Square. During these assaults, he circles overhead on his flying horse, hurling flaming pumpkins at buildings and occasionally at adventurers brave enough to confront him. And on that topic, adventurers can confront the Headless Horseman directly. During the Hallow's End period, the Horseman can be summoned in the Scarlet Monastery graveyard, and if the group is strong enough, they can defeat him. Afterward, the ghost of Thomas Thomson can be found outside the monastery walls, fully aware of the torment he has inflicted on the people of Azeroth. However, his story doesn't quite end there. Bound by an unbreakable curse, Thomas's soul cannot escape his fate as the Horseman. Every year, without fail, he rises again, spreading terror before being slain, only to be reborn from the ashes the following Hallow's End. His cycle of torment endlessly repeats, haunted in life and cursed in death. It's safe to say that Sir Thomas Thomson, once a devoted family man and a hero of the Knights of the Silver Hand, has become Azeroth's most tormented soul.
The Horseman descends upon this realm!